There's a quote from Francis Bacon. I'm saying this because we've talked before and I know what you're interested in. Uh, there's a quote from Francis Bacon that the best possible attitude a man can have or can adopt or can try to sustain is a mixture of being very serious and very playful. Now, I think I know what he means.
Are you setting a target for what you should have read by a certain time frame? Do you set yourself,
Yeah.
for instance, I need to finish this particular chapter by tomorrow so that I can get on with this?
So, okay, great question. So I'm 43. How old are you? You're like 29? Something like
29,
that?
yeah.
Okay, so it's different for me than it is for you. I remember the world before the internet. But the main reason I would never do that, I would never set this kind of time frame, is that I Google and read about things that are mentioned in a given chapter, right? Of whatever it is I'm reading. So, I can use a made up example, but there are lots of real examples. I have a biography of Gouverneur Morris. Gouverneur Morris is one of the men who wrote the American Constitution. He's much more important than most people think he is because he's not famous like Thomas Jefferson is. Nevertheless, so I've got this, I've got this biography of Gouverneur Morris, and because the biographer is flattering Gouverneur Morris, it'll mention really briefly a massacre of some Indians or a massacre of some slave people, and I'm like, whoa, wait, what was that? Now,
Yeah.
even if I just go to Wikipedia or something, um, the amount of reading and learning you do by going and checking things on the internet, basic fact checking, basic contrasting perspectives, that can be very significant indeed. So that's one reason why I wouldn't work against a clock.
Yeah.
And now look, it depends whether you're reading primary source or secondary source. I've read things from ancient Greece where just stopping to go and look at a map, like it mentions a place, it mentions an army, like wait, where was that? What happened? Figuring out things that are in a text, that can expand your reading quite a lot. Now, as I say, the world was different before the internet, and anyway. But this is how I read, and it's part of why I take such a long time to read. I would not describe myself as a fast reader.
Yeah.
Um, I really wonder if the people who read more rapidly than I do actually learn and retain the information. Now, I could be wrong. It could be there are people who read really rapidly and they're really nailing this stuff. My experience being in the university classroom with people and also being at work with people, just jobs, like jobs where we all had to read the same report and then analyze and discuss it or something. I do find most humans have a much lower level of reading comprehension than I do. For me, if there's one word I didn't understand, I catch on it, I pay attention to it, I look it up. And sometimes it's a printing error. Like sometimes there's a mistake in the book. Like, oh, I didn't know that word because it's not a word. But, sometimes I'm ignorant. I don't know the word or what have you. But if there's anything I don't understand, whether it's substantive, like it's something historical being alluded to or being mentioned, I will think about it. I'll look it up. So that's part of the slowness of my reading. And I've found myself surrounded by people who instead, I think they skip over whatever is challenging. So I'll give you one really brief example, but this was in a workplace setting. I was working with a guy, and he had a PhD, and I don't. And oh God, this woman who founded a set of abortion clinics in the United States. I'm forgetting her name now. They're called the such and such clinics. She's highly politicized, and because abortion is so politicized in the United States. Anyway, we had both read the same article about the connections between her and Adolf Hitler. And it was amazing. So anyway, whatever. He was actually Australian. This is an Australian guy with a PhD. And he was like, I don't know, it's all bullshit. It doesn't add up to anything. She wasn't a Nazi. She didn't hate the Jews, whatever. And it's like, dude, you and I just read exactly the same article. And I was like, did you notice the part where it said this? Did you notice the part where it said that? And it was partly that he was ignoring red flags, like evidence, of how crazy this woman is.
Yeah.
Nazism and Hitler was only she was kind of crazy her whole life, but these were examples of craziness. But also I actually Googled and looked up primary source and facts, things that were only a single sentence. I went and looked into them. So yeah, that was just a workplace conflict. But it illustrated to me the way most people. The word bluster in English is quite unclear. What does it mean to bluster your way through something? It seems to me most people most of the time are blustering their way through things. There is a certain kind of humility required to look at something and kind of put your finger on the text and say, I don't understand what's going on here. And, maybe it is just bullshit. Maybe you don't understand just because it's badly written. But, yeah, that's the way I read. And I think that's also why I'm impatient, or why I intensely dislike an author like Jordan Peterson or an author like Friedrich Nietzsche. Because it's not worth reading that way.
In terms of what you do read, how do you go about choosing what it is you feel like you should be? Is it based on what you're interested in, or is it based on what you feel obligated to know?
All right, so look, it's a great question. I'm a tremendously passionate person. And I just say, I don't even know if Melissa really knows this about me, but I'm often yearning to read several books. They're books I really want to read, and I may never have the time to read them. So that's one side of it. There are things I'm really passionate about. I'll give you some examples that are not obvious. I have a book here about how 12-step programs are complete bullshit. So those are the programs that help people quit drug addiction. So now this is not Aristotle. This is not Thucydides. This is not some great philosophical book from the past. But I'm very passionate about it. I've owned it for quite a while. So I'll be honest with you, that book, I wanted to buy it, I think more than 10 years ago. And I couldn't, partly because I didn't have money, partly because I didn't have a home. There were many times when if I was moving between places with just a backpack, I couldn't own books. So I finally bought the book maybe 2 years ago, and I haven't read it. I'm very passionate about that. I'm very passionate about sobriety, about people quitting drugs, about the critique of prescription drugs, the critique of the medical establishment generally, and so on. That's very interesting to me. Okay, but now I can list off for you maybe 6 other things I'm passionate and highly motivated about that I may read about instead. Now, some of them I think I don't have to tell you because you know from the YouTube channel. But okay, I'll use one that you do know from the YouTube channel. Then I'll get into some more things you don't know about me. Both Melissa and I care a lot about genocide and slavery here on this continent. And there are always new aspects to it that we're stumbling on. So we just found out about this event in the history of the United States where basically the federal army went and, okay, it doesn't sound that unique, but they went and massacred a group of black people who had become allied with indigenous people. So it was native people and black people living together, and the U.S. Army goes to massacre them all. It's just I really want to read about it. I bought the book. It'll arrive in the mail in the next few days. I don't know when I'll have time to read it. And I have a book arriving in the mail about George Washington. I've read quite a lot about the so-called founding fathers. If you have time to read No More Manifestos, you'll get a sense of how much research I did on that period of American history. So these are things I'm passionate about. These are things I want to read about all the time. However, I recently was considering moving to Israel. I started reading all these books about what kind of job can I get in Israel, like just really practical stuff. I saw a book the other day on Amazon about how to open a laundromat. I saw a book about how to be a car salesman. I have purchased several books about the importing and exporting business. Several books about working in real estate. So there are also books on really boring practical subjects around that reflect, again, this same crisis I've alluded to, which involves how am I going to earn a living. I have several books. I just literally walked to throw them in the garbage, and I changed my mind and took 2 of them back, about how to make a film, how to be a filmmaker, and going to film school, and what you do and don't learn in film school, and how the film industry works. Now, that actually does belong in this category. Those are quite boring books. They are really. In case you think those books are interesting, they're really boring, but they're telling you technical details about filmmaking works. So that stuff is going on all the time too. Again, this is interesting because this is stuff Melissa may not know about me. I'm really not passionate about watching YouTube videos that way. I do actually really force myself to go and watch YouTube videos so I can respond to them on my channel. And I may stop doing that at some point. I may just be doing something better with my time. But it is, I'm bringing in new viewers to my channel all the time. So I'm sure you noticed I did about 10 videos on TKO Sam. So this is, well, you might think I really enjoy watching his videos or that I'm a fan or I'm obsessed. No, like that is really for me like studying for an exam or something. That is work I am forcing myself to do. And yes, I mean, it's partly for money. I do earn some money from YouTube. But of course, it's partly for these other kind of political goals I have for the YouTube channel. But like, whether it's TKO Sam or Anissian or whatever, I'm not actually someone who enjoys, putting time into YouTube that way. And of course, that's partly just because what's on YouTube is garbage. There's so little. I don't know any other YouTube channels that are like à-bas-le-ciel. Maybe if I did, I'd be addicted to watching those YouTube channels. Yeah. So that I just said that's a kind of counterposing opposite. But look, so your question is, how do you decide what you're going to read? Well, when I was in university, which is only a couple of years ago, right? Then you had to make these much more structured, strategic decisions with the little bit of time you've got. This is one of the reasons I warn people about learning languages. If I start learning Chinese again, okay, how much time do I really have to read anything? I have a book right now that this is typical of me. So if you talk about the 40-year span of my life, this is typical of me. Not the last 2 years. I purchased a book about Seneca. So Seneca is an ancient Roman political figure. And this is a political biography or political history of Seneca. I purchased it both in English and in Spanish. And my temptation is to start learning Spanish and read them in parallel, and I actually posted some things to the internet showing me doing that. And I could live stream that. Once I get to a certain point, I could start uploading videos of myself learning and practicing Spanish. That may end up on YouTube, but I haven't decided if I'm learning Spanish at all yet. So, yeah, I define projects and then I pursue them. And I've done that for Melissa too, where I've said, like, look, Melissa, you can't just read aimlessly. Let's think about this project. Let's think about what it is you're researching. And then you're going to read a bunch of books pursuant to that objective. So yes, within No More Manifestos, the portion of the book dealing with the American Constitution, that's obviously a project like that, where there were a certain set of questions I had to answer about the American Constitution. And then I did so much reading. Sometimes, I read a 400-page book, and it only resulted in one paragraph being added to my own manuscript. There were things like that, But yeah, there's a lot of research behind. I did a lot of reading for each paragraph of writing in that part of No More Manifestos. Whether it shows or not doesn't matter. I did that because it's the right thing to do. So no, that's the short answer to your question is I define projects that have some kind of particular outcome. So this is not something I said to Melissa, but with my ex-wife, what I said to her, she was a more scattered person than me. And I said to my ex-wife, make reading productive. That was the slogan I gave her. Like, you have to think about how is your reading, like, what is it producing, Now, she had a PhD, so it's pretty easy for her. So you could say, look, why don't you write an article on this, and then you're going to read this, and this in relation to that article. Now, if you don't write the article, that's also good. You did this research, and you decided this is all bullshit. I'm not going to write the article. But that could lead to another article. So that idea of making reading productive, that was something I really impressed upon my first wife, who, I just say, unlike myself and unlike Melissa, she actually was the kind of person to become addicted to video games, to sit down and play. She needed some of that kind of guidance. Okay, sorry. Your next question I'll give a one-sentence answer to, I promise.
This is a question regarding when you spend time with Melissa. Um, if you are doing productive things with Melissa in terms of, uh, lack of a better term, knowledge building, reading, what kind of things are you doing with Melissa besides going out for walks and just talking? Like
Well,
sorry,
yeah.
my partner, her name's Bambi, so I'll refer to her as Bambi, like the deer. I was talking to her the other day. Remember how I sent you a message saying that after 7:30 at night we usually
Right.
just have dinner and we
Right.
watch Simpsons. We kind of waste our time, and I was telling her that, and she really understood what I was saying. And she said, "Well, why don't we try to do something more productive?" And
Right.
I think a great way of doing that is by watching documentaries instead.
Yeah, sure.
And yeah, so we've started one documentary. It talks about how General Motors closed in America, and this Chinese billionaire ended up buying the company and pretty much broadened his own workforce and started utilizing some of the workforce in America and whatnot. But I was curious if there were any like similar things that you do with Melissa to make the most of your time with her.
Right. So look, the most obvious answer is YouTube, right? So we read things and we make book review videos talking about them on YouTube. And what that brings is pressure and stress and deadlines, which is good. And, some people might not cope with it well. Melissa has just a few times during the relationship written articles, that went on a blog. They weren't formally published in newspaper. I've also done some writing that way, where you research something and then write it up. But during this relationship, it's really been YouTube. Now, the total number of videos on Melissa's channel is not that great. It's not that numerous. But still, nevertheless, she went through the process of learning to make YouTube videos and of putting that kind of pressure on herself. And quite a lot of the reading she did, including the stuff about Central Asia, Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan and those places, it was pursuant to, was supposed to be preparing for a series of YouTube videos she'd make that have never gotten made. Stay tuned. Eventually, in 2025, those videos will be forthcoming. So, but I'd say a hypothetical YouTube video can have the same effect as an actual YouTube video, where I'm doing this research and I'm discussing this with you and I'm, contrasting these different perspectives so that I can put together a thesis on YouTube. Now, I'd also say Melissa's participation in my videos has sometimes been significant that way too, where I'm doing a video talking about something and she has also read it. So I'd give an example. The video I did on Joe Biden and his policy in China. Now, I do 90% of the talking in that video. That was the most recent video. It's talking about Joe Biden and China and India. And there's a specific document Joe Biden published that time stating his strategy for basically ruling the world. But his so-called Asia Pacific strategy. Well, Melissa had read that also. And again, even if she does 10% of the talking in the video and I do 90%, that is this kind of project where both people in the relationship, we're both focusing our mind and learning and researching and questioning and discussing it. So that's, that is what we have in our relationship. And very few other people have it. Now, writing and publishing your writing, it's very different in 2022 than it was in 1992. Probably wherever you live in Australia, there is a local newspaper that has nothing to publish, and they probably would be willing to publish articles you and your girlfriend would write. Not they wouldn't pay you, but probably if you were bringing together research on current affairs, and those articles would be read and paid attention to by 5 people or 10 people. Newspapers are really dead this way. So I just asked the question, other than YouTube or other than a podcast or something like that, how can people be motivated? As I said to my first wife so many times, how can you make reading productive? My first wife had a PhD, so she was able to present a paper at a conference. She was able to present her ideas in more or less formal academic settings. I would point out, even this is something you probably don't know about me. I've never talked about this on YouTube, or not much. When I was teaching English in China, the English lessons I was teaching were intensely political and had a lot of historical information in them. I don't know more artful way to say than that. But like I would give lectures on the history of university education in the United States of America and how university education worked for black people and how it worked for First Nations people, indigenous people, and how it was working today and how it emerged out of this over the last 100 years. Now, it was an English class. I mean, this is about language, and I could say more about these lessons, and why this specific lesson was being given to them. My students were supposed to be being prepared to be university professors themselves. It was a special program, so they had the opportunity to go to the United States and study there or teach there or both. So that was part of the reasons for that, explaining to them how the university system works. But I think you can see I'm making what could be a very boring and meaningless job into an opportunity for me to really learn something as well as teach something that way. And then my own reading is focused, and I'm writing something. I'm just writing a photocopied handout that goes to my students. So this is a real question. Now look, I'll give you one other example. What if you had your own church and you gave a sermon every Sunday? Jordan Peterson, before he started doing YouTube, that was his plan. YouTube, he switched to later on when he figured he could do this on YouTube. He was going to have his own church where once a week, every week, he gave a lecture about morality. I understand. Now, I utterly despise Jordan Peterson. I think he's an imbecile. But, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, these would probably be the kind of projects available to you: writing, publishing, lecturing at a podium, preaching. I think you do have to look for these things in life. And then once you have that, it brings discipline and focus and clarity to all the reading you're doing. So, coming back to the example I used before, I'm interested in these 12-step programs, how it is drug addicts become sober. Well, I don't want to do that in a self-indulgent way. I don't want to just, I don't want to just read texts that agree with me and I don't want to just put a bunch of comments on Facebook and Instagram. What you people don't understand is, okay, if I am going to make a YouTube video that states definitively what my conclusions are after doing research, how do we look back on the last 100 years of these 12-step programs, of how self-help has evolved in this way, how therapy and treatment of drugs, looking back at the last 100 years, what are my conclusions on this? It raises the stakes, right? There's a sense of fear, a sense of consequence. Anyone would say this. They don't want to feel like a fool. They don't want to make a YouTube video and then later look back on it and go, oh, I was so ignorant, I was so dumb, or, okay, now before an audience of 1,000 people, I have to present my conclusions about the history of this kind of therapy. This brings a sense of focus and clarity and purpose to the reading you're doing. And it will not only make you judge yourself as inadequate. If you say, okay, well, I'm not smart enough, or I'm not knowledgeable enough, I haven't done enough research, I don't know what I'm talking about. Good. Make that judgment and then go out and get smarter and get better informed, do more, Not saying that should be your final judgment. Well, I'm worthless, so I'm just going to give up. No, that's not what I'm saying. But you make that judgment and then you do more work, do more reading. You're also going to judge the book that way. Instead of just sitting there and relaxing and saying, wow, this is a really great book, now you're looking at that book saying, well, this is only giving me one side of the story. This is explaining this aspect, but here are these other questions that are totally neglected or sidelined, and why is that? So I've got to read some other book or at least Google. So yeah, that's this is the best answer I can give you. It may not be possible for you to apply this in your own life. I know people who have jobs or commitments or responsibilities where they can't do anything like that. But as with everything, I can contrast the seriousness I bring to this to my own father. my father thought he was an intellectual, but he wasn't. He was just this totally self-indulgent piece of crap. And but to give a very real example. So right up until the day he died, my father made excuses for Joseph Stalin. He supported Joseph Stalin, put it that way. Well, if he had just had a YouTube channel where he stated his views openly and so on, anyone could have challenged him. I myself did. I mean, obviously, I disagreed with my father. I challenged his beliefs. He could have watched his own YouTube videos back and felt embarrassed. But if he's just doing this alone, there are many books that affirm his bias, right? He can only read books, right? And now, actually, within Lebanese politics, within Middle Eastern politics, you can imagine this downward spiral. So yeah, yeah, that's the best answer I can give. Although maybe not everyone can make use of it. Yeah.
Oh, no, that was terrific. Thank you for that. When you're doing things such as, like, say when you're working out or going for a walk by yourself, are you listening to ebooks? Are you trying to make the absolute most of your time in that case?
Right. Yeah. You've guessed the answer. So it changed a little bit from one period of my life to the other because of the languages I'm studying. But so for the last 2 years, I do listen to university lectures. I listen to interviews with the authors of books. So sometimes it's a lecture from the author of a book. There are a lot of those on the internet. And again, it doesn't matter if this is a podcast or YouTube video. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Where an author has written a book and then he's giving a lecture, partly trying to convince you to buy the book. So with books on history and politics, that's the sort of thing I listen to. So yeah, again, whether you think of these as podcasts or otherwise, I used to listen to lectures from the London School of Economics. I now haven't for almost 2 years. There are some universities that directly upload lectures, and the majority of them are crap. So you have to kind of pick out, maybe 1 out of 20 are really good and worth listening to. But I got pissed off with London School of Economics. I felt their quality had decreased over the years. But this is one example. So yes, I am doing that. Now, there are 2 limits to this. One, there are not enough good podcasts to listen to. There's not enough good political commentary or historical analysis. And then the other thing is the limit of your own ability to pay attention. So when I was in Yunnan, some people asked me, how did I ever find time to read the books by George R. R. Martin, the Game of Thrones books? I did them as audiobooks when working out at the gym, and then also when moving house. You'd be amazed how many hours you spend packing things into boxes and stuff when you're moving between. Yeah. It's more hours than you think it is. But it's like, oh wow, I listened to 15 hours of this audiobook while doing that. So I did listen to some stuff like that. I had a period of time here in Victoria where I would do push-ups and study Chinese at the same time.
Yeah.
I'd have my phone out, be doing language vocab memorization and do push-ups. Melissa probably didn't see me doing that too often. She must have seen me do it at least once. But anyway, I'd go back and forth that way. So that's a different way you can try to make the most of your time while working out at the gym. And, I've been thinking about making a YouTube video talking about this. I think the only lightweight podcast I listen to, and this is fully over 10 years now, where it's just kind of silly and not so intellectually robust. I used to listen to Kevin Smith's podcast, the filmmaker Kevin Smith. And Kevin Smith is but this is the dramatic twist. That's why I was thinking about making a YouTube video about it. I quit. So I forget if I quit 1 month ago or 2 months ago, but pretty recently, I made the decision, forget it. I quit. Maybe it was 3 weeks ago. I forget. I'll have to look it up. But I was like, this is it. I'm never listening to this podcast again. But I'm just being honest with you for the following reasons. One, it is not always possible to really pay attention to a political audiobook or university lecture podcast. Just depends on what kind of exercise you're doing, or it is not always possible to pay that much attention to what you're listening to. That was one reason why I listened to Kevin Smith's podcast. And 2, I completely admit this. I do not have enough friends. Whenever I say I have no friends, Melissa objects and says, no, you can't say that. You have this friend and that friend. Okay, fine. I do not have enough friends. And I'm aware that psychologically, listening to that Kevin Smith podcast, that's him talking to his friend Mark Bernardin. They've been good friends now for 10 years or something. I'm aware that psychologically this was kind of like having a a simulation of a friendship. And Kevin Smith became vegan during this period of time, and they would talk about vegan food in Los Angeles. They would talk about very light politics. But my point is, this is not necessarily psychologically healthy. That while lifting weights at the gym to listen to Kevin Smith, or while doing other distracting activities. So I don't. But that's it. I really think in the last 10 years, the only thing I listened to that was not very serious, very mostly about political history. But sometimes economics, whatever, however you want to think of these things. The only really lightweight podcast I listen to is Kevin Smith. And right now, I am mourning its absence from my life. That is not spirit. Oh, and one other example. Holy shit. Because I said before there's not enough good material to listen to. I listened to every fucking debate between Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. Every debate between Bernie Sanders and the other contenders. So sometimes American politics produces these kinds of debates, these kinds of lectures with political leaders. And then that's like fucking 12 hours of material you can listen to at the gym. So yeah, but you do not feel like Bernie Sanders is your friend. You do not feel like Joe Biden is your friend. That doesn't have the same kind of impact on you emotionally, perhaps. Can you tell I'm being 100% honest in these answers? This is the real.
I was So when I go out for walks, right, I listen to music on through my phone, put my earphones in, and I find myself every 2 minutes I'm taking my phone out of my pocket, I'm replaying the song from the start, or I'm skipping it to the good bit. Okay, when I've exhausted that, next song. Quite literally every 2 minutes I'm taking my phone out and touching it, and I realized, why don't I just try to listen to a lot of the stuff that you have on YouTube? Just put it on 1.5 times speed, treat it as a podcast, and I find that I do not. The only time I'm touching my phone is to skip an ad.
Yeah.
And I just thought this is a much better use of my time, and it made me think, oh, okay, you know what? I've never really tried an ebook. Maybe I should try that and see what he thinks of it, and
right.
see if he has any ebooks that he listens to. But yeah, that's definitely something that I've been doing lately.
Look, I just mentioned. So you have my books on paper there. Many people have requested that I perform the books as an audiobook, but it is very different. Like the sense of humor you have as words on paper, and the style of sentence structure and so on, it's very different. So in some ways, this is the most obvious thing in the world. But you might be surprised how few books are enjoyable to listen to as a audio recording. Whereas, as I say, if you're interested in a book, probably the author of the book has given a lecture or done an interview to promote the book, which it's just a quality of the English language. The fact that they're giving a lecture, the fact that they're doing an interview, that they're discussing the ideas in the book in an interview format, that is just my advice. You will probably find that better. This is leaving aside the question of how many books are badly written or are just stupid. And I'm throwing a lot of books in the garbage right now. I've been astonished. I mean, I didn't own any books at all when I moved into this apartment. I moved into this apartment, barefoot and with only the clothes on my back. And now I have these bookshelves that are full. But a lot of the books I had the highest hopes for turned out to be crap. Whether they were about China or about American politics or about Europe. So, obviously, I don't need to say any more there. But, that kind of disappointment is inevitable. But then there's the further disappointment when something works in the written word, it doesn't work as spoken narration.
I guess the only other question that I had doesn't really relate to this topic, but it was the one that I sent you on Instagram a couple of days ago, almost in response to those messages that you sent me about not knowing other good scholars, humanitarian workers, YouTubers, etc. I just wanted to know if you would elaborate on what you meant by good in that instance.
Well, we're setting the bar pretty low here. Start with Buddhism. Yeah. So I didn't know any good scholars in Buddhism. Okay, are you willing to talk about the history of slavery in Buddhist countries or within Buddhism as a religion? Or the moment I mention this, do you freak out and say, I have to silence you, I can't let you speak? This is totally acceptable.
Yeah.
No, that's, okay, but what do I mean by good? Well, a good person, I'm serious. I mean, this is obviously, it's a very narrow and specific example. This isn't a criterion we can use for everything. But right away, this tells you something very deeply about this person's motivations, about their intellectual integrity. And also, I think it tells you about what they're going to accomplish in the next 5 years and what they're not, right? Now, another example, this one might surprise you because you're not an insider in Buddhism. Are you willing to admit that hell exists in Buddhism? That after people die, they go to hell, and there are demons, and there's torture in hell. It's not that different. I mean, there are some differences from the Christian and Muslim idea of hell. There's a giant tree covered with iron thorns, and the thorns impale you through your body. There's some details like this that are a little bit different. But it's hell. I mean, Buddhist hell is hell. Demons, torture, flames. It's not that different from the Muslim idea of hell. Yeah. I think there's a river of acid or something. I forget some stuff like this. You swim through a river of something horrible that hurts you. I just forget if it was acid. There's something horrible about this river. This kind of stuff. So, now, again, just like the slavery thing, you might be surprised, but there are these people who will absolutely freak out and not, they can't admit that this problem exists, if you like. Now, is it a problem? I mean, the fact that slavery is part of the history of Buddhism, is it a problem? You could have a positive attitude towards it. You don't have to freak out. You don't have to try to silence me and censor me and control me. Now, I'm already coming much closer to veganism with this next example. Okay, what about sex scandals within Buddhism? What about humanitarian work and corruption and the question of where did the money go with this humanitarian project? What about simply politics within Buddhism, admitting that Buddhist monks are involved in politics? Sometimes they're very important political leaders. They're involved in elections and things. Like, really, Again, you're not an insider. All of these things are responded to with obloquy. You must be silenced. You must be kicked out of the room. We can't even, there's no way we can admit this. Now, okay, so that's bad. And I think the opposite would be good. The opposite set of attitudes would be good. Well, that's what I encountered in Buddhism. I think you can already guess that that's very closely parallel to what I encountered in the vegan movement, right? Now, on YouTube, you get to see me completely uncensored and unchecked, indulging in the most hard-hitting analysis of both Buddhism and the vegan movement, frankly. So you might not get the sense that I'm a bird in a cage, because you get to see me on YouTube spreading my wings and flying free. But in real life, I am a bird in a cage. It's true of Buddhism, true of veganism. Okay, Chinese studies, Asian studies within academia, within the universities. I couldn't study Chinese. I also couldn't study Laotian or Cambodian or many other things I wanted to study. Anthropology, another field I've had something to do with in university and so on. Now, okay, what is the tendency I'm describing? You could just say this is a censorious tendency, or this is a defensive tendency, or a fragile tendency. You could describe this as just stupidity, I don't. What I have to say is that in a very deep sense, this is fascistic. It is similar to fascism in that it is a gleeful return to aristocracy. Now, I say a lot about aristocracy on YouTube, and I say a lot about aristocracy in those two books. You could go through those books and just highlight all the passages that mention aristocracy and put them together, and you'll have another book. So this is a leitmotif I'm very interested in. I say very passionately in both books, the darkness of the Dark Ages is with us still. There are people who rule over dukedoms within the vegan movement. There are people who rule over their own dukedom within a university, within academia. within Buddhist studies and within Buddhism as a religion. They have a kind of aristocratic power and wealth, and they make decisions. And they really try to control you. They really try to suffocate you intellectually in just this way. And they are also at the same time defending their dukedom, defending their fiefdom in terms of finances, in terms of money and corruption and power in a more palpable sense. So, because obviously ultimately people are donating money to a Buddhist charity and they don't want that to be discredited. People are donating money to support this vegan foundation. They can't allow these things to be questioned, or that's how they respond to it. So yeah, I think in some ways this might be an unexpected answer for you to this question, but in some ways, of course, it's echoing the themes you've heard on my channel again and again and again. Now, look, how many specialists are there in the world who really know about the politics of Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar, Thailand? How many people are in the world who have that expertise and who also have expertise in communism and Chinese, who also have expertise in Buddhism, going back the whole 3,000 years? I have this tremendous expertise in that area, and this is not the only area I have expertise in. You may ask, many people ask, well, why can't you get ahead in this field? Why can't you at least get a master's degree, if not a PhD? Why can't you have a career in this field? Some people might ask, why can't you get ahead just politically? Just directly get some kind of job in politics? Because how many people can really give political analysis of what's going on in this part of the world? But this is the answer. Who will even let you ask these questions? And about communism in China, about communism in Laos, about the current government of Thailand, however you describe it. Some people would call it a democracy, some wouldn't, But the politics of the region. There's a kind of authoritarianism that I think in both Australia and Canada, both in England and in the United States, we have a kind of authoritarian tradition that we ignore at our peril. We ignore just how authoritarian it is. Now, and part of how we ignore it is through politesse, through carefully cultivated manners. There was a vegan event in Canada I wanted to attend. This is more than 2 years ago. Mike the Vegan was one of the most, I think he was the most famous person there. He was one of the most famous people, but I believe he was the most famous person there. And I sent them an email saying, look, Melissa and I can attend this event. We should show up and so on. Now, I am not attributing this directly to Mike the Vegan. I don't know if it was his decision. But I remember I said to Melissa, look, just watch what happens. The fact that I have dared to disagree with Mike the Vegan about marijuana, specifically, marijuana causes brain damage. It harms your brain. If you want to put this. It's not just mental impairment, it's brain damage. It's bad for your health. He has made videos claiming marijuana is... Anyway, I won't even misrepresent his position, but whatever. He and I disagree on this, and he knows we disagree on this. What could be more absurd than refusing to allow me to attend a vegan event, or even for me to speak at the vegan, for even me to be celebrated and put on stage next to Mike the Vegan? I could have my own podium, and I could give my own, whatever. I could be one of the star attractions at this freak show. But I can't even attend. I can't even be in the audience. I can't be in the same room because I'm willing to say marijuana is bad for you, quit marijuana. And Mike the Vegan is not. So fascism is a complex concept. The problem here is a kind of authoritarianism, a kind of aristocracy. And it's largely unquestioned and unchallenged. And I would say that this is true in, many, many different fields of endeavor. Here I am stuck in Canada with nothing else to do. Do you think I can become involved in the politics of the Green Party of Canada? Do you think I can get involved in any of the vegan groups that exist here? The answer is no. Do you think I can get involved with a group for people learning Chinese, or people who care about Chinese politics, people who care about the future of democracy in China, the future of democracy in Myanmar, the future of democracy in Cambodia? We can go through a whole list? And the answer is no. Anywhere I go, the door will be slammed in my face. And look, how I feel about it is one thing. What it says about the other person's character, the judgment on who they are morally, who they are intellectually, their intellectual integrity, their personal integrity. I think that is very dark and very troubling indeed. And that really is in brief my understanding. I would say of all four cultures, England, the United States, Australia, and Canada. I think we have this in common.
That was great answer. Thank you for that.
My reflections on the meaning of the word bad.
One I've literally just written down a minute before we started. It's a really simple and straightforward question. Okay, you wake up in the morning. Do you plan your day?
No, right now, not at all. But so Charbel, I'm happy to be totally honest with you about these things. This is a very peculiar time in my life. This is really a time of crisis for me. I have had periods of time when I had a job. I have had periods of time when I was enrolled in classes. So you've probably heard me describe it a few times on YouTube. But when I was enrolled in classes at University of Victoria, there were days when I'd wake up at 5:30 in the morning and study Chinese before going to class. Now, in many ways, a very dark and depressing time in my life, I might add. There have been times when I can point to myself being industrious and having structure. Recently with Melissa, I bought her planning books to urge her to actually write down hour by hour what she was doing with the day. And overall, that had a positive effect on her. I mean, you can get her opinion on it. But, I really said to her, look, when I look back at what you've done in the last 6 months, there seems to be nothing to show for it. So, why don't you start, in this sense, paying attention to what you do? But I just point out there are two different things there. You asked, do I plan the day? So one thing is to look ahead at what you're doing today, but the other thing is to look back and just actually record it. So you can write down what you did in the day and rely on your sense of shame. Because if you write it down like, oh gee, I guess I spent 3 hours just watching TV or looking at Instagram. Like if that's your problem, it may be that instead of planning what you want to do, just noting it down on a chart. You know what I mean? Where you obviously you can buy a special book for this, but you can use a piece of blank paper and draw lines on it. But if you're just filling in where the hours of the day went, that will probably make you aware of the time. Now look, I mentioned Melissa. Melissa's a better example than me because she's someone who had to learn to think these things through and make charts and record things down. And I would joke with her about it because she got into recording these things in such detail on her computer. I said, oh, you're playing that video game with the green squares again. It's an inside joke because it wasn't a video game. She had this chart and she was filling in the blocks square by square as to what she was doing with each hour of the day. Again, in retrospect. But then I mean, if you're looking back at your week and you're regretting what you did with that, then you're going to, one way or another, you will plan what you do differently. So I just say Melissa is more of a normal person that way. I think it can be said of me that I'm of the opposite type, where I'm just very intensely aware of what I'm doing all the time anyway. Now, does this mean I am an angel? Does this mean I never waste time? No. But it depends on what you mean by a waste of time. Melissa and I, we would spend hours just walking and talking to each other. We're here together. So,
I wouldn't call that a waste of time.
No, right. But it's not, okay, there are these YouTube influencers who are like, oh yeah, wake up and earn as much money as possible. So, well, you're Australian, this won't be so hard for you to imagine. But like we would do a 2-hour walk from here to the coast, look at the water for 5 minutes, and then turn around and walk back. And the point of the walk, I mean, you're getting a little bit of exercise, but it was mostly, and we talk about politics and history and what she'd been reading and what I've been reading and what we're going to do in the future. So we, in terms of the blocks of time in the day, just talking. That's, I just say if, Someone else might consider that a waste of time, you know. Now, sorry. So I'm giving you such a long answer because I'm being honest.
No,
So,
I appreciate it. Thank you.
well, look, when I was a student at UVic, that's one period of my life. When I was actually teaching as a professor in China, that's another period of my life, in terms of how you plan your time and how you use it. But the other thing that's very strange is I just finished this period of writing the book. Well, it's 2 books. You have them there. And that was also very strange. There's been no other time in my life like that. And it's not that it's exhausting to write a book, but you push yourself. A lot of the book I wrote lying down in the end. I didn't do that initially. Maybe the first 50% of the book was spent sitting at a desk. I actually bought several keyboards, for the actual typing. That's why there's so many typos, or there were. In the first version of the book, actually, the typos are fixed now. But, I switched between several different keyboards and I was sitting at the desk. And then actually toward the end, I was lying on the floor. I'm lying on the floor working on the book. So that's also, now again, I'm not being lazy. I'm actively writing a 600-page book.
Yeah.
But it's very strange. Like, so I can't say, I'm just being honest with you, I was already a very experienced writer, but the way I spent my time writing the book, there were some days, and Melissa was a witness to this, there were some days when I woke up first thing in the morning and I was very inspired and I wrote all day passionately, and you could hear the keyboard clicking and there was kind of barely a break taken to eat anything or something. And there were some days when I laughingly said, there, I finished the chapter, and printed it out and gave it to Melissa, and then I went to the gym. There were some days like that, where there's this kind of image of tremendous energy and verve and passion in writing. But the first draft is very different from revising a later draft. There were also these days of me lying on the floor with my computer open and, rereading and revising and small changes. So, again, I think you can tell, this is not boasting, this is not complaining, but put it this way, in what ways I am industrious and in what ways I'm lazy are different in these times. There's a quote from Francis Bacon. I'm saying this because we've talked before and I know what you're interested in. There's a quote from Francis Bacon that the best possible attitude a man can have or can adopt or can try to sustain is a mixture of being very serious and very playful. Now, I think I know what he means. Like if you think about the creative work I'm doing in writing that book, so you haven't read that much of it yet, but
Get to stuff.
Right, I'm not complaining. I'm just mentioning. But there are parts of the book that are humorous, But okay, I'm researching and writing about the police beating these people to death, the police shooting these people to death. There's some stuff about that. And in some ways, it is very serious. But the creative process is playful, is silly, is even kind of childlike. And having that balance. And, I think there is some laziness involved, too. Now, another example, you've seen me talk on YouTube so much. I'm very playful when I teach a language. Like if I'm standing in front of a classroom teaching English in Cambodia or something, or in China, there's a playful element to that, and there's some laziness kind of involved in that, right? But at the same time, what I'm doing is entirely serious. Now, I would mention the majority of my students did not appreciate me. In those contexts, I could think about it. There would be a minority of students who were like, wow, this guy knows what he's doing. He's not dead. But many, many students don't get it. They're like, why is this guy doing this? This doesn't make any sense. But my point is there's a playful element to coming up with a lesson and presenting the lesson and questioning the students and, explaining and practicing the language with them. Now, again, in my opinion, I'm just being honest with you now, I've been doing YouTube for 8 years. I think my current videos are basically masterpieces of this method. I don't think in my first year on YouTube they're that good, or maybe even the first 3 years. I honestly, I haven't gone back and looked. I think it took me time to master that. But the video I just did, the most recent video on my channel right now, you will always be stupid, you will always be ugly. I'm laughing at many points in that video sincerely. That's not a fake laugh. I really find this hilarious. But it is playful, but it's also very serious. And I'm somewhat emotionally fucked up about some things I'm saying. So yeah, okay, long answer. But yeah, I mean this is the most honest answer I can give. So I don't want to now digress into kind of what the crisis in my life is right now, but I think it suffices to say from the minute I finished the book, I began a new time period of crisis in my life. And I'm very happy I wrote those two books. If I die tomorrow, it's very significant to me personally that I finished those two books. And I don't need to quote myself exactly, but there were many things I said to Melissa. As soon as I finish the book, I'm going to do this. As soon as I finish the book, I'm going to do that. And the truth is, I've finished the book and I have no idea what I should do next. So just at this moment, the answer of what I do, waking up first thing in the morning. It's an especially inconvenient time to answer that question. Well, but look, I just say in your own life, I mean, I do hope that's useful for you. Because, I mean, I think it's something you're going to have to ask yourself. You could have a different answer at different times of the same year, like just a few months apart. In what ways is my life serious? In what ways is my life playful?
Yeah.
But even something like Buddhist scholarship, it was important for me to keep a certain playful element to what I was doing. Like, oh, hey guys, everyone thinks they know what the Buddha said about being a vegetarian, but do we really know? Have we actually, like even something as boring as that? That's what separated me from other scholars, because there's some really boring essays about Buddhist philosophy out there. Okay, so great. I should wrap it up if you don't mind. It's partly because I'm sick. You can hear I'm coughing.
No,
but
great. Forgive me, I should have asked how you were feeling.
No.
I remember you telling me that you weren't feeling well.
When we arranged this call, I thought, oh, great, I'll be completely recovered by the time we do the call, and no, I'm still sick. But look, there's no reason for this to be the last time. It's great talking to you, and give my best to your girlfriend/wife, and, for all I know, I'll see you again soon.